Hi everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Front Row here on Economy.lk. Today we'll be talking a little bit about sustainable development, what the government is doing, some of the things that we as the public and private sector need to know as well. And we have with us Chamindry Saparamadu, who is the Director General of the Sustainable Development Council, the apex body related to SDGs for the government as well. Welcome Chamindry to the show. We see a lot of different things that the council is doing now, and it's a bit more visible in terms of the framework, some of the groundwork that the country is doing in the backdrop of course, the economic crisis and what's going on. Potentially sustainable finance is an opportunity. Could you explain to the audience and to our viewers what are some of the things that the council is working on in laying this groundwork to provide that environment?
Thank you, Shiran. And first of all, let me thank the Chamber of Commerce for inviting me. I will just first start by saying why sustainable development goals are important for Sri Lanka, because in 2015, Sri Lanka, along with other member states of the United Nations, went before the General Assembly of the United Nations and committed to achieving 17 sustainable development goals by the target year of 2030. And since then, there have been several initiatives to lay the policy frameworks, the legal frameworks to achieve the sustainable development goals in Sri Lanka. And we have actually, as a country, achieved quite a lot because our global ranking on our SDG progress has seen a continuous upward trend, so much so that Sri Lanka is now placed at the 76th place out of 163 odd countries in our SDG progress. And we are also, our country score at 70 also has placed us well above the regional average of 65. But however, due to the pandemic, impact of the pandemic and the current economic downturn, there is a serious challenge. These issues have actually caused challenges to our ability, to achieve our sustainable development commitments. And also there is quite a significant risk that the development outcomes that we have hitherto achieved are, at a risk of being reversed. So in this context, I think sustainable financing becomes really important. And so the council has actually looked at the whole financing architecture, looking at public finance, the private investments, and even capital markets, and look at how all these different areas can be better aligned with SDGs. Because the SDGs have also created additional challenges with regard to mobilization of additional resources, given that we need to achieve these targets, but also we have to ensure that whatever the progress that we have achieved is not reversed. So the Central Bank of Sri Lanka has developed and launched the Sustainable Finance Roadmap in 2019, which provides an overall framework to drive sustainable finance in Sri Lanka. And it also aims to provide guidance and support to financial institutions to effectively manage the environmental, social, and governance risks associated with the projects they finance, and also increase support to businesses that are greener, climate-friendly, and socially inclusive. Under this framework, the Central Bank has also developed the Green Finance Taxonomy, which was launched, I think, in April this year, which is also with the aim of promoting sustainable and green finance activities in Sri Lanka based on the roadmap. It provides a classification system for identifying activities or investments that will move the country towards meeting specific targets related to priority environmental objectives, and addresses the needs among financial market participants for clarity and transparency in what is understood and what qualifies as green. So going beyond that and also complementing some of these efforts, the council has looked at streamlining the national budgetary frameworks by actually integrating SDGs into the national budgetary framework through introducing a SDG budget tagging and coding system. So we are currently working with the National Budget Department supported by the UNDP Sri Lanka to introduce a policy-based and standardized codification system that would identify, tag and monitor SDG initiatives across all government agencies. This is important because there cannot be a disconnect between the national policy framework and the budgetary frameworks. And I think if there's a disconnect between the strategic planning framework that have made commitments to the 2030 agenda on the one hand and public budgets driven by business as usual, then of course there's a big issue in terms of how we direct government budgets towards SDGs. Then we are also looked at how private investments can be directed towards SDG sectors by developing and launching the Sri Lanka SDG Investor Map, which is a UNDP initiative that was done in collaboration with the Sustainable Development Council and the Board of Investment with technical support of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. You were part of this process, Shiran. It's a market intelligence tool that helps the private sector identify investment themes in emerging markets with a significant potential to advance the SDGs and are also aligned to government policies and national sustainable development commitments. The Sri Lanka SDG Investor Map has identified 15 key investment opportunity areas under 5 priority sectors through a consultative process. And these 5 priority sectors are in renewable energy, food and beverages, infrastructure, healthcare, and consumer goods. Then we are also looking at the capital markets, and currently in the process of formulating the Sri Lanka Green Bond Framework with the Finance Ministry taking the lead on this, and capacity building of key stakeholders for accessing capital markets such as thematic bonds, etc. So this is actually, these bond frameworks will help Sri Lanka meet its SDG commitments and the Paris Agreement climate commitments. So there are various initiatives, that have been taken to drive the, sustainable financing to meet our SDG commitments as well as our Paris Agreement commitments.
Sure. I think that was a good broad list of things that are being done to improve the environment. Another important report that the country puts out maybe every 3-4 years is the Voluntary National Review, which a lot of other countries also put out to the UN, and kind of gives an account of how our progress has been, what we've been doing related to SDGs. Maybe to our viewers who, or even to the youth who are really looking at climate-related jobs or sustainability-related jobs, why is this report of importance? And given there was a lot of consultation also, in particular with government stakeholders, what has been some of the key learnings that has come out of what Sri Lanka can do better related to SDGs?
Okay, so the Voluntary National Review is actually a process to look at how Sri Lanka is faring in terms of our SDG achievements. And it provides the opportunity for a country to take stock of the progress, identify what are the challenges, caveats that weigh down on our progress, and also look at opportunities. And this review is generally done following the guidelines issued by the UN Secretary General through an very participatory process. So when Sri Lanka conducted the Voluntary National Review, it followed a very participatory process with the engagement of various levels of stakeholders from government, private sector, civil society, international development partners, etc. And also at various levels, at the national and the provincial levels. It actually gave us an idea about how we are, faring in terms of our achievements, and also it examined how the national and the provincial levels have evolved to undertake ownership of our SDG implementation, and how the SDG targets have been incorporated into national policies and strategies. and also took stock of our progress in achieving SDG targets under 7 key thematic areas, which actually constitute the core pillars of our transformation journey towards a sustainably developed nation for all. And these pillars are economic diversification, building on a blue-green economy, achieving knowledge-based and technology-driven transformation, social inclusivity, public sector reforms combined with innovation, then protecting biodiversity and addressing climate change, and strengthen law enforcement, protecting the human rights of all citizens. Now, if you look at these themes, I mean, these kind of resonate very much with the budget, and the economic model that the president has outlined, that is based on economic, export-oriented economy and a blue-green economy, a digital economy and a knowledge economy, which the president highlighted, very strongly yesterday. So this report also identifies what are the main challenges that Sri Lanka is facing. So, for example, some of the systemic and structural barriers that retard our progress, which actually, if I just summarize some of those, the policy inconsistency, I think this is something that is being discussed, at various levels. The frequent policy changes, in the policy landscape, there are a lot of inconsistencies. And then, of course, the gaps in the legal framework, particularly the disconnect between the policy making and law making, where the policies and legislations that conflict with the SDGs create grey areas where institutions sometimes lack the legal authority to fulfill their obligations and to achieve the respective SDG targets. And of course, another issue is the institutional fragmentation that kind of impede ownership of the sustainable development goals across all sectors. The report also highlights the need for institutionalizing mechanisms to identify, engage and target marginalized and vulnerable groups in policy interventions beyond their present engagement. And then I think one of the things that really comes out strongly in this report is the importance of multi-stakeholder partnerships, because no single stakeholder, be it the government or the private sector, possesses the knowledge, the capacity or the resources to achieve the sustainable development goals on its own, so it has to be a collective effort of all stakeholders. And I think during the time of the pandemic, the strength of partnerships came out very strongly because the government leveraged on its partnerships with various stakeholders in responding to the pandemic, responding, to I think kind of reorienting, collaborating on resource mobilization, and then across various sectors, and then also reaching out to various groups, partnering with civil society to address urgent food security and hygiene and medical needs of vulnerable people. And then of course the partnerships that were built with various private sector entities. You can take the COVID-19 Healthcare and Social Security Fund, which supported and strengthened activities aimed at mitigating the spread of the pandemic, in addition to supporting the COVID-19 treatment facilities and quarantine centers. You might recall that it was like a funding modality, a crowdsourcing funding modality where our private sector partnered with the government in running quarantine centers, etc. So the importance of partnerships come out very strongly. So, and I think in going forward, it's really important to kind of capitalize, on this, and then institutionalize some of these mechanisms too.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chamindry. I think there was a lot of food for thought and a lot of learnings as to what Sri Lanka has done on the SDG side so far. Of course, there might be a lot of gaps, a lot of learnings, but at least we've done a little bit of an assessment now, and it's up for us, the public, as one of the key stakeholders, the private sector as another stakeholder, civil society, and of course the government, to provide the environment to make sure that by 2030, we're able to at least meet most of these targets that we've set for ourselves as well. So thank you so much, Chamindry, for joining in. And to our viewers, please stay tuned for insightful episodes like this on Front Row for Economy.lk.